Alright guys, welcome to another video. You've got Mr. Everything English and you are now watching the best channel on YouTube when it comes to your English GCSEs. I joke before you start saying that my head is massive. Alright guys, so today what are we looking at? Today I want to cover English Language Paper 1 Question 5. Now this is the creative writing question. Now you know my style by now. I cut the BS and I get straight into it. So guys, let's not overcomplicate it. Now, first things first, what must you do before you approach the question? You must understand the mark scheme. Now, if you were to go to the website and look at the mark scheme, it's a lot of gibberish. It's hard to understand. The language is, in my opinion, over the top. It's a little bit complicated. Let's bring it down and let's look at what does the exam board say that we must do to get the grade 9, to get the grade 8. Guys, the first bullet point is that your writing, it must be interesting. Now that's the most important element. But what does interesting mean? Interesting doesn't mean that the examiner must be thinking, whoa, this is amazing, let me share with my friends. No, interesting means it must be engaging. Now how do you make it engaging? You make it engaging with the other elements of the mark scheme. So the next important element, and guys, this is importance in my opinion. So guys, the next important element is that you must have imaginative vocabulary. You must. If you look at the mark scheme, guys, in the top band, it comes up 3 times. It says imaginative, not good or very good, imaginative. You want to be daring, you want to be ambitious, you want to push your writing at its peak. So guys, that's imaginative vocabulary. Now, how do you learn imaginative vocabulary? Literally, guys, go to thesaurus.com. On a piece of sheet, write down 10 words that you commonly use, verbs and adjectives. So angry, happy, sad, jump. You name it, write them down. When you're on thesaurus.com, put that word into the search bar, click on search, and pick an alternative from the list that comes up. Learn it and then use it. Guys, it's not complicated. Don't bother going and buying a thesaurus because some of them have not got a lot of words in them. And why would you do that? It just takes ages. Thesaurus.com, guys, make it your best friend and use it. Guys, next part of the mark scheme, you must have a range of language devices. I'll add the word here, a range, and it must also be sustained. That's what it says in the mark scheme. Alright guys, first things first, what are language devices? Language devices are things like similes, metaphors, verbs, personification, oxymoron, juxtaposition, rule of 3, repetition. These are all language devices. You should all know them. Now a range means that you can't keep using similes over and over and over and over again to get the top answer. You must have different language devices for different paragraphs. Number 2, sustained. There's no point in writing 1 paragraph that's fantastic and 4 paragraphs that are rubbish. You must have consistency throughout your entire essay, especially if you're aiming for that top band. Guys, next one, same thing, range and sustained. But this time, what do they want? You must have a range and a sustained use of punctuation. Now, what counts as punctuation? You've got semicolons, you've got colons, you've got speech marks, you've got brackets, you've got ellipses. This is what counts as punctuation. You must have a range of punctuation. Now, commas and full stops don't count. In my opinion, students in year 11 should be able to use commas and full stops. You want to use the other stuff to get the high marks. You want to use the colon, the semicolons, and so on. That is what will get you the top marks. Not, of course, guys, commas and full stops, but that's a given. So, you've got the fact that it must be interesting, the fact that you must have imaginative vocab, the fact that you must have a range of language devices, and the fact that you must have a range and sustained use of punctuation. Now let's go back to the top because I'm conscious of the camera cutting off around here, just in case it does. Guys, back to the top. You must have structural features. Now, what does it mean, or what do I mean when I talk about structural features? Guys, you must have long sentences. You must have short sentences. I'm talking about short as in a 1-word sentence. For example, I went to the shops and I bought some eggs, full stop. Amazing, full stop. They were the best eggs that I'd ever seen. Just an example, it's a bit of a rubbish example, but you get what I mean. Guys, next thing, you must have long and short paragraphs. You want to make sure that your last paragraph is not your shortest paragraph. Because if your last paragraph is your shortest paragraph, it won't be effective. What the examiner will think is that you've plunked it there because you've run out of time. So you want to have maybe 2 short paragraphs woven into your writing. And when I say short, I mean short, maybe maximum 1 line long. Because you want to make it as easy as possible for the examiner to give you the mark. So guys, let's do a recap. Number 1, it must be interesting. Now, how do you make it interesting? By having this, and this. Having imaginative vocabulary throughout the entire piece. Having a range of language devices throughout the entire piece. A range of punctuation and a range of structural features. Long sentences, short sentences, zooming in, zooming out, shifting focus, a cyclical structure, which is when you start and you end in a similar way. Now, there's one thing that you must have outside of all of this, if you want the top bands, if you want to get the top grades, you must have a clear approach to SPAG. Meaning, guys, come on, capital letters, full stops, spelling mistakes, avoid it. Yeah, you should be pretty confident and you should be pretty strong on that end. So guys, this is the mark scheme. This is the mark scheme. Now, what do we do with this mark scheme? How do we bring it to life? So, shall I go over language devices? Guys, you know what? Let me go over a few language devices and a few pieces of punctuation. So guys, language devices, I'm looking at things like simile, metaphor, oxymoron, repetition, so many, rhetorical question, and the list goes on. That's what I mean when I say language devices. Structural devices, you have long and short sentences and long and short paragraphs. Those are your 2 fundamentals. Then you may include things like, you may have a cyclical structure. Guys, a cyclical structure is when you start and you end your story in a similar manner. So for example, if the opening is very dark and gloomy and horrific, the ending may be similar. Now then you've got things like zooming in and out, you've got shifts in focus, new characters, and so on. So guys, that's the fundamentals. Now let's actually plan an answer. And how does it look like when you plan an answer? So, imagine the question said. Guys, imagine the question said, let's do last year's question from the GCSE. So guys, last year the question said, write a story about a time that you felt abandoned. Now imagine that was the question. Write a story about a time that you felt abandoned. The first thing I must think of is my plot. That's the first thing. So guys, again, I'm just thinking on the spot. My plot for a time that somebody felt abandoned will be a story about my character Ellie being trapped in a coffin. That's the core of my story. That's the plot. That my character is trapped in a coffin. How she got there, whether she escapes, that's going to be flushed out in the story. But as a core, that is my plot. That Ellie is trapped in a coffin. Now I'm going to plan with you guys the first paragraph. And all you would do is follow that same plan throughout the entire story. So guys, in the first paragraph, I would begin my story with Ellie inside the coffin. So my first paragraph will be Ellie in the coffin. So that is my first paragraph. I'm not going to waste time. I'm going to get straight in there with her being trapped in the coffin. But I'm going to reveal 2 things. Number 1, actually guys, you know what? Let me move it in the center because I need the space on the sides. So guys, number 1, Ellie is in the coffin. However, to create interest, to make it engaging, Ellie does not know where she is. So what will happen is, she'll wake up, eyes open. That's the beginning of my story. As she wakes up, she begins feeling around, and she feels the mud, and she feels the insects, and she feels the dampness of her clothes. And slowly throughout the first paragraph, I will reveal where she is. But when she wakes up, she does not know where she is. That's what happens first in the paragraph. And then as the paragraph develops, she describes her surroundings. Now that is what I would do as the paragraph develops. So as we get into the story, we realize that she is actually in a coffin, but that will be revealed at the end of the first paragraph. Now, why have I got two arrows coming out of my main point? Because the last thing I want is my paragraph to lack detail, to lack substance. So I always say, you plan the main point with 2 points coming out of it. So in the first paragraph, Ellie is revealed to be in the coffin. While she's in the coffin, it starts off with her not knowing where she is. And then she describes her surroundings, and the paragraph ends with us knowing exactly where she is. Now, we can't forget the mark scheme. The mark scheme talked about how we must have a range of language devices. So when I'm talking about Ellie not knowing where she is, I'm going to use a simile to describe the darkness. And when I'm talking about Ellie describing her surroundings, I'm going to use a rule of three. So for example, the coffin was damp. It smelt of cabbages, and the insects were crawling all over me. I've got 3 words and phrases to describe what's happening around her. So I've got my language devices. Then I need punctuation. Somewhere in my paragraph, I want to use an exclamation mark. The exclamation mark, I think I will use it at the end of the paragraph when she realizes where she is. Now, in that paragraph, I must have vocabulary. I must have at least 2 imaginative words. My first imaginative word will be the word melancholy. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, I did a post about this the other day. Melancholy is the idea of being sad, but you're not really sure why you're sad. She will wake up upset, but she doesn't really know what happened. Therefore, she will feel melancholy. And guys, the next word I'm going to use is the word lackadaisical, only because recently it's become one of my favorite words. Guys, lackadaisical is the idea of being lazy, of lacking motivation, of lacking drive. Now, as a plan, that's a perfect plan, because I've got my content, I've got my language devices, I've got my punctuation, I've got my imaginative vocabulary. All I would do is turn that into a paragraph. That's all I would do. And I would do that again and again and again. My next paragraph, I would change this to show what happens next. I would make sure, guys, where's my pen? In my pocket. Guys, I would make sure that I change the bottom half. So in my remaining part of the story, I will use a different piece of punctuation in the next paragraph, and a different next one, and then a different one. I will use different vocabulary and different language devices. Why? Because we must have a range. Now guys, look, you're marked on 2 things. You're marked on your content, and your content is what you write. And you're marked on your language, and your language is how you write. This top half is the what, this bottom half is the how. Now guys, look, I'm conscious this video might be going on for too long, but this is how you plan a bulletproof story. This is how you plan a bulletproof story. What you want, guys, is ideally, you want 4 paragraphs like this. So 4 paragraphs where you have decent sized paragraphs, and you make sure you have vocabulary, punctuation, and language devices throughout. And you plan the top half, which is your content. And that is what happens in each of the paragraphs. So let's say, for example, we have 4 paragraphs like this. Then you will insert 2 paragraphs that are 1 line long in between these 4. And maybe between paragraph 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, you put 2 short paragraphs that are 1 line long. I wouldn't plan those because they're only 1 line long, but I would plan these. Now guys, it's up to you how you do it. I've had students in the past who've rehearsed this bottom half off by heart. So they know in paragraph 1, I use a simile and a metaphor. In paragraph 2, I use repetition and rule of 3. In paragraph 3, I use rhetorical question and oxymoron. They know that these are my 10 words that I've learned off by heart. In paragraph 2, I use these 2. In paragraph 2, I use the other 2. And then so on, and so on, and so on. Punctuation. Once in each paragraph is enough. First paragraph, exclamation mark. Second paragraph, colon. Third paragraph, semicolon. Fourth paragraph, ellipsis. Or brackets. But my point being, guys, it's a bulletproof way to plan your answer for question 5. Now guys, look. As always, if you have any questions, guys, drop me a message. I try to reply to as many as I can. Whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Snapchat. But guys, any questions, drop them down below. You want to make your question 5 bulletproof and fantastic. Because this question, guys, is worth 40 marks. It's half the paper. If you can smash this question, you will achieve excellent marks. And guys, I end it with this. I am not saying that I'm an excellent teacher. But my point is this. I've used this method in the past, and it's a tried and tested method to make sure that you get the grade 9 response. Language, content, you put it together and you've done everything that you need to get your grade 9 for English. Alright guys, I'm going to end the video there. I hope this helps on how to plan your question 5. It's been Mr. Everything English. Thank you for watching. Peace.